Hey folks, and welcome back. Joshua here. Today's video covers part 1 of a 2-part series on communication. Part 2 is going to go in greater detail into the different types of communication styles. Today, I'd like to cover an overarching view of how I see communication and some pitfalls that we generally fall into. And then I'd also like to give you an acronym that covers a whole host of practices that you can work on so you can become a master communicator. Stay tuned. So getting started, what I'd like to tell you is that communication involves communion. It's in the word. When you think of communication, generally what most people think of is one person talking with another person. What I want to emphasize in this video is that communication first and foremost occurs with the self. In fact, something I say and will always say throughout these videos is that what you do with and to yourself is how you treat and work with other people. So what that means is if your communication with yourself sucks, then your communication with others isn't going to be good either. What normally goes across or comes across or is described as communication is in fact expression. So what I mean by that is, for example, this video right now is me expressing myself. Until someone watches this video, takes that information in, and actively works towards understanding, I've just expressed myself. So notice the key with communication. Communication involves two things, and it could be you and your thoughts, you and another person, you and the environment. Working towards communion, which in this sense is understanding. Now that's not to say that if you don't reach understanding, you're not communicating. What I mean to emphasize is that when two people or two things are actively working towards connecting, then that communication takes place. Unfortunately, there's a lot of information, or I guess fortunately there's a lot of information on verbal and nonverbal communication, but there's next to none on communicating with the self. So if any of you watched my previous video on emotional intelligence, then what you'll recognize is that's where I start with everyone. Now, I mean professionally, but that's also what I'm doing with everyone else, is I'm starting with myself first. I'm learning what it is that I'm wanting to say. Now we do that by actually tapping in to what it is that we're feeling in our body and thinking in our minds. That's the first step of communicating with the self. So when we express, we're expressing through our thoughts, our concepts, our beliefs, through mind. We're also expressing through our body. Nonverbal communication covers the ground very well here. What it fails to do is to talk about the need to connect our body with our mind through our own self-communication. So as an example, let's say you have some discomfort in your stomach. To fully understand and communicate with your body, you have to access the sensations and figure out what it's saying. Are you hungry? Are you anxious? Did you actually eat too much and you should have stopped at the third donut? Whatever the case may be, what you have to do is connect your thinking with your body and figure out what the entire message is. If you don't do that, then that displeasure in the body will oftentimes go unnoticed and ignored. So that's one of the biggest pitfalls that we find with communication with the self and communication with others, is that we simply are ignoring signals. What we're ignoring is someone's expression, either our expression or someone else's. Now again, I'll cover this in greater detail in part 2, but we fall in the trap of being passive or passive-aggressive rather than assertive. Assertiveness allows us to connect with our truth and then express that completely and truly to the outside world. So oftentimes where we fail as communicators is we don't in fact know what it is that we want to say. Oftentimes when I'm asking my clients about their communication issues, what I find is they don't really know what they want to say. They don't know what they want the other person to hear. Rather, they get stuck in trying to figure out what they can get from the other person. So rather than it being a place of communion, a place of safety and trust, it becomes this place of force of will, and force of frustration and anger. Anyone who's ever been in a relationship with anyone has experienced this issue. Rather than speaking clearly and openly about what it is that is going on with you and what it is that you might want or need, you're trying to second guess, you're trying to manipulate the situation, you're in fact trying to get something from the other person. The problem with this is most likely the other person is doing this as well. It doesn't work. The frustration falls in because that frustration, which is being blocked from the goal, is telling us that our goal is wrong. Our goal shouldn't be to try to get something from someone else. In fact, when we try it that way, we are almost always doomed to failure. And then it becomes this power struggle that inevitably leads to resentment and frustration and displeasure in the relationship. What's really important is to slow this whole process down. Now, I've talked about that in regards to meditation. The same holds true for basically everything I'm going to talk about. Slowing down, connecting with the self, allows us to know what the hell is going on. Without knowing that, we go into a blind room, dark room, blind, trying to find whatever it is that we might think will give us pleasure and peace. And it doesn't work. Now I'd like to teach you an acronym that came to me spontaneously after many years of working with all types of different clients. Whether individual or couples, young or old, it really doesn't matter. Every single person struggles with communication. My acronym teaches us to focus on these main components so that we can be master communicators. So, BITES. BITES stands for bite-sized chunks, inquiry, timing, emotional honesty, and specificity. I think I've got a thing for the number 5, if you've already found that one out. So keep in mind, all of this stuff that I'll be talking about works just as effectively with the self as it does with other people. It's important then to practice this stuff on yourself first so that you can get good and then work towards having this communication style with other people. Also, it does not matter what type of relationship you've got going, BITES works for all of them. It also works for the environment depending on what's going on. So let's get started. B stands for bite-sized chunks. Now then, I've seen so many times in couples counseling where one person is going on and on and on until the other person's eyes glaze over and they've stopped listening. Now everyone knows, because you've studied this, that listening is a huge component of communication. Well, if the person has stopped listening, then that communication has stopped. The problem is, someone oftentimes has so much to say by the time they come see me that they just dump. Now they do that with their partner, they do that with themselves, they do it with everyone. So bite-sized chunks means getting to a place where you distill the message that you're wanting to impart to yourself or to someone else. Now the way you do that, the way you get there, is you've got to slow down once again, access your bodily sensations while accessing your wants and needs, and figure out what exactly it is that you want the other person to hear. Notice I keep saying that. Not what you want them to understand or agree upon or accept or anything. What it is that you want them to hear. It's our responsibility to have a clean message here. Without having bite-sized chunks and just going on and on, we flounder. We flounder because we don't really know what it is that we don't know what our message is, and the other person, frankly, gets tired of listening. The truth is everyone needs some breaks and time to process the information that they get, ourselves included. So as an example, for a bite-sized chunk for the self, let's say that you want to get better at waking up early in the morning. So the message is simply what value it is that you want to express in your life. And let's say you want to be more punctual. You want to have better time management. So you say to yourself, I want to have better time management. Rather than going on this long, huge story telling yourself about how you've been late in the past or will always be late and all of that negative self-talk. The message in all of that is, I want to be more punctual. Clean, specific, and allows you direct focus on your next goal or next step in that goal. For someone else, a loved one, a partner, even a coworker, the bite-sized chunk is simply what your truth is in the situation. So same thing with checking in with yourself and talking to yourself. You do the same thing first before you speak to the other person. And let's say they're loud. They smack their gum, they don't wash their coffee cup, who knows what it is. The bite-sized chunk is this, once again, founded upon a value. And let's say the value is you want better cleanliness in the workplace. And you simply say, I sure would appreciate better cleanliness in the workplace. Straightforward. Again, There's no blame, there's no huge story, there's no huge amount of information that needs to be processed. It's clean and it's to the point. They will then listen. Be much easier to process. I stands for inquiry, which means to ask. One of the hugest pitfalls that we get into with other people is to assume and mind read. All of this assumption and mind reading does two things. One, it keeps you from actually knowing what the other person wants, and two, it pisses the other person off, because guess what? You probably guessed wrong. Inquiry is as simple as asking open-ended questions. Now, I watched the video that said that closed-ended questions are horrible and end communication. That's a bit too far. Closed-ended questions are just fine to let you know where you're going in the conversation. So an example of a closed-ended question, let's say you're on a date, you say, do you like NASCAR? If the person says no, then you don't ask them why and how and where they first watched their NASCAR race. Closed-ended questions are fine, we just don't want to do too many of them. Open-ended questions are those, of course, that start with how or what or where, that allow the other person to explore the nuances of their thoughts and feelings and everything about that topic. Inquiry with ourselves very much looks like just being quiet and checking in with the bodily sensations going on. What that might mean is we check and see if we're hungry. We check and see if we're tired. Throughout the day, our body is once again expressing itself to us. And when we stop and listen to it, decode the messages, then we're better able to stay in a healthy place, because when we're hungry, we eat. When we're tired, we sleep. When we're whatever, we do what we need for ourselves. Notice this very much sounds like Zen here. That's what Zen is all about, is it checks in with what the body is telling you, and when appropriate, you go ahead and you do what you need for your body. T stands for timing. Oh my gosh, this is such a huge issue with couples, and it's such a subtle thing that people tend to forget. Timing goes like this. When timing is off, it goes something like this. Person A, let's say me, I'm frustrated with the wife, and I walk up to the wife, and the wife, well, she's studying. I don't care that she's studying because I have an issue. She didn't clean something. She didn't put something away. And I tell her, you didn't clean something. You didn't put something away. Well, she's studying. Guess what she does? She does this. Huh? She's not prepared to have that conversation. The timing is all off. Now, if you recall what I had said earlier, if we go into a bit of communication trying to take something from someone, it almost always will end in failure and fighting. What timing suggests is that you find the appropriate time, day or night, time of day, time of week, time of month, to have that conversation, whatever that conversation may be. So in my earlier example, the way this works is this. Walk up to the wife and I say, hey wife, I wonder if we can talk about household stuff, household cleaning or chores later when you're not studying. Right? Now, a lot of people hear that dreaded phrase, we need to talk. I am not saying that at all. What I'm saying with timing is you say, hey, there's this important thing that I'd really like to talk about when you are available to listen and to understand and to give feedback. That's all timing does. Very oftentimes with couples, you have one morning person and someone else who's not a morning person, the wife, and I'm trying to talk about all this stuff at 6 in the morning and she hasn't even woken up yet. Or if she's out of bed, she's not fully conscious. Timing is off there once again. I'm all excited and upbeat and want to talk about whatever, and I haven't taken into account where she is in her body mind. Timing is all about being empathetic and understanding that when you're ready to say, to express, the other person may not be. Something as simple as making a schedule for when you have that conversation about the next big purchase or household chores or whatever. It allows both people to be at their best and to be ready for that conversation. E stands for emotional honesty. Now, I went into pretty good detail in my last video on emotional intelligence with what I'm talking about here. Emotional honesty is something as simple as saying, I am fill in the blank with an emotion. I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm frustrated. For folks that have had some counseling experience, you may hear those I statements that are oftentimes talked about. Right? With I statements, what you're getting at is speaking your truth and being done. Emotional honesty is sharing with that person that you're communicating what you think and what you feel, and not at all throwing anything else out there. Specifically, no blame, no shaming, no storytelling about what happened in the past. That's where we get really lost. Emotional honesty is always grounded in the present moment. So if you're actually angry in the moment and you say, I'm angry, perfect. What that actually allows you to do is access choice. Because if you are in fact angry and you maybe recognize that you're too angry, stop the conversation. You walk away, you take a break. With emotional honesty, you have access to all of your skills and traits that allow you to be a good communicator, which is your nonverbals that are communing and being congruent with your words, your thoughts, your wishes, the specific things that you're wanting to say. It all works together for you to be clear. Without being emotionally honest, what happens is that anger or frustration or sadness or whatever it is, it gets tamped down, just like we talked about in that last video on emotional intelligence. It gets tamped down, and that energy comes out. It comes out in the communication, and then all of a sudden, you're not communicating, you're Wah! Now everyone knows that the message will get lost, or the original message gets lost, and the message that is heard loud and clear is that emotion being expressed. The other person most likely will shut down, or they'll react in kind. Being emotionally honest allows you to honor what it is that you're feeling, and it gives you that space to honor what the other person is feeling. Finally, specificity. Now, if you notice, I've kind of talked about specificity throughout all of these, but being specific goes something like this. I want to have sex, or I want to buy a new board game. That's my big thing. Or whatever the specific thing is. What we tend to do in our communication is to say, I want better communication. What's that look like, though? My communication with my wife or my coworkers or my whomever is going to look different than yours. So what's happening, and I get this phrase from neuro-linguistic programming, is we're turning our verbs into nouns. It's called nominalization. So we turn something like communication, which is an active, ongoing process, into a truncated noun. I want communication. Or another one I hear all the time, I want support. Being specific outlines for yourself first and for the other one second exactly what that communication looks like, feels like, sounds like. I want support in the form of a back rub on Saturday. That's pretty specific. When we're specific, the other person then can process that information and then decide whether or not they're willing and able to give it. Here's the problem with not being specific. I say something like, I want more support. I hear it all the time. They say something, someone says something like that. The other person, without knowing what that is defined as for the person, then has to go up in their head and mind read and assume and try to give them the support they think they want. Very often what happens is people are horrible guessers, and they might be doing something that they say and think is support, but that isn't received as support. My best example of this was I was working with a family group, and the mother was going on and on about how helpful she was to the kid, teenager. All this stuff that she was doing to help her kid along. And she talked for about 5 or 10 minutes or so. When she got done, I asked the kid, so what did you need from your mom? And the kid looked at the mom and said, I just wanted you to help me get my driver's license. I'll always remember that. Because if she had asked, used inquiry, and if the son had been specific, said, hey, I need this specific help, then their frustration that was built over months, if not years, would have gone away. Probably wouldn't have even existed. So, practicing bites throughout the day looks like checking in with yourself, knowing what it is that you want, expressing that cleanly and clearly with the appropriate timing, emotional honesty and specificity to yourself and then to others. Practice this stuff and you'll really get good at it. Take care.